Well, I like the way that you've tied all of those up and you have a great kind of soundbite for that. I want to touch back on political reform, which was your first
Yes.
kind of main platform.
Hmm.
So many of our voters have become disenfranchised by the two-party political system that we have in place today. And as
Right.
an independent candidate, what would you like to tell voters about the necessity of changing this
It's
two-party
all
system?
rigged. It's all rigged. In 2018, we had more registered voters, disenfranchised registered voters who stayed home than voted for either Senate candidate in 2018. In 2016, and I won't go into where we are because of that, 2.4 million eligible Tennessee voters did not vote, right? So I get the whole disenfranchised thing, but here's what we're up against. The parties have an existing machine in place, right? The lady, I'll talk about Marquita Bradshaw, the lady who won the Democratic nomination or the primary for Senate. She busted her fanny. Nobody was thinking she would win. She was like number 3 down the list, right? But she won the primaries based on her own efforts of going back and forth across the state, right? And then the guy who was supposed to be the shoe-in Democratic candidate, he's the one who came in third, right? So now here's this person, and she's a beautiful human being. In terms of we need real people in office, she's it, right? Her and me, we're it. Now I know I sound like I'm rooting for my opponent, but I don't see Marquita as an opponent, right? I see Haggerty as an opponent because he's a career politician. We'll get to that in a second. So even in trying to win the primaries, she didn't have the support of the Democratic Party. She barely has the support of the Democratic Party now, right? The fundraising between the two, Haggerty has raised $12 million. He's had it given to him. He hasn't had to work for that $12 million. And by the opposite side of that, at one point, I know Marquita only had 28,000. Now, I know the other night that she had raised quite a bit with another thing. But anyway, the situation is that the two main party candidates have a machine behind them. They have people ready to go knock on doors and put out yard signs and raise money. And anytime you read something from a candidate online, especially Haggerty, he didn't write that. He has staff that writes that, speech writers who write that. Every word you see from me came from my brain and my fingers on the keyboard. Okay. Now it gets worse than that. You have corporate owned TV stations, right? WKRN in Nashville is owned by a corporation called Nexstar. They also own 6 other stations across the state, including WREG here in Memphis. They called me about 6 weeks ago saying we're going to they didn't say we're considering having a debate. They said we are having a debate, and would you like to participate? Then I said, of course, I'd love to. And then the next day they sent me this criteria, one of which is that you had to have raised $50,000 in order to qualify, right? So when I just kindly brought it to their attention that that was against FCC regulations, because once they open the door for one candidate, then they have to allow equal access to every other candidate in that race, right? They decided to just cancel the debate. Instead of letting the independents participate, they just decided to cancel the debate. Now, I'm not talking again. They weren't testing the waters. They already had it scheduled and set up, right? And so, I mean, there's that. It just disgusts me to no degree, right? Then there's corporate owned newspapers like the Tennessean. It's owned by Gannett, the same corporation that owns USA Today And they also own what's left of the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, which is a joke. This Sunday's paper, they did a huge spread on Marquita, and they did a huge spread on Haggerty, right? And they said in the introduction, we asked the two main party candidates these 10 questions. And oh, by the way, yeah, these other people are running, right? Now tell me, what service are they doing to the electorate by acting that way, right? Most people, I'm 57. I grew up with a dad who sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper because, by God, that's how you kept up with what was going on in the world. He would come home at night and sit down and watch Walter Cronkite because, by God, that's how you kept up with what's going on in the world, right? Nexstar controls the news feed into 63% of the American households. They tell you what's going on in the world, right? The corporate TV stations and the corporate newspapers. It's folks like you and your group who do the real service of making sure that people know who's out there and who's available. Now, yes, I understand that the qualifications to run for Senate or for any office for that matter, you need 25 signatures on a petition. Big deal, right? Anybody could do it. But what's the harm if someone wants to get up and say they make a fool of themselves? It's their doing. You could just say, oh, bless his heart, and go on, right? So that's what I don't understand. And then the third thing of how they got the whole system rigged is from the very state legislature. If you look on Vote 411 on the, or even on Go Vote Tennessee on the app, they have the sample ballots are out. Bill Haggerty is top of the list. I'm like, wait a minute, why is Bill Haggerty top of the list? And then Marquita Bradshaw, and then the independent candidates in alphabetical order. I called the state Secretary of State's office. I'm like, how is this even legal? If anything, all of the candidates should be in alphabetical order, right? It's state law that the majority party is listed first, which is the Republicans, then the minority party, then a minor party, if there is one, like a Green Party or a Libertarian. And this year for Senate, there are no such things. And then, oh, by the way, I guess since we have to put them on there, we might as well list the independent candidates alphabetically, right? So the entire system is stacked against us. Now, I don't know when's the last time you've been to the Smithsonian on the Mall in DC, but there's an incredible exhibit about the Founding Fathers, right? And the Founding Fathers hated the concept of political parties. They knew that this was what it was going to come to. They hated the idea, they didn't even ponder the idea of career politicians. The reason we have checks and balances is so when an individual is doing their duty, if that duty happens to be in the legislative branch, then they know that the people doing their duty in the judicial branch or the executive branch, they all check and balance one another. The corporations own everybody in every branch now. There is no more checks and balances. It's utter insanity. So the reason I'm running is not because I have this long political resume, right? It's because I'm a real human being, and we need real human beings in office doing the work of the people. How did that sound?
That sounded great. I like your passion.
I'm going to write all that down.